Start recording. And so today, with our conversation, the first thing I wanted to look at, and one thing we get a lot of questions on, especially from a manager perspective, is the financial delivery process. So I wanted to take a look at how financial delivery works, what we can do with this financial delivery action item, and then take your guys' questions for anything that I don't cover during the training session. So first of all, financial delivery, what we're talking about is how we're delivering and producing that financial package that we give to our board every month for those associations that we manage. So we use a financial delivery action item, and this financial delivery action item will automatically generate reports and close the fiscal period for our accountants. So that way, when our accountants run this financial delivery action item, it's generating all the reports that they need. They're going through, they're reviewing the reports. And then once your accountant reviews the reports and confirms, yep, financials look good, your accountant is going to step this financial delivery action item to the manager review step. So that's where you guys come into the picture, right? You're saying, okay, I have this new financial delivery action item and it's in the manager review step. So what do we do from here? We click the drop-down menu and we look to see, well, what our financials look like. Notice any notes that our accountant leaves us, we can see right here. So we can see, you know, looks like Michael had some notes for Rhonda there. So we can see any notes and response to any notes. If I wanted to respond, so first of all, I've got this action item, it's in manager review. I see that my accountant has left me a message. If I just wanted to shoot a quick message back to my accountant or to Michael, just hit new message, and I can go send to a specific role. Or if I go into my other email field and I start typing out Michael, I'll get his name and I can send the message directly to him. So we can communicate directly through these financial delivery action items. And communicating through this action item is nice because then we can always go back and see, well, what was that thing that Michael and I was working on, or what was that question that we had? It makes it really nice and easy to have that one place to go back to and find that stuff. So when we're ready to actually review what Michael's done, we can jump in here, click this little green paperclip, and then we can see a copy of our financials. So I can scroll through this report and just look and see, you know, whatever it is that I'm looking for, make sure everything looks good. So from here, from the manager review step, we have the ability to do a couple different things from this point. So first of all, if I go to step this action item, I have a step for financials need adjustment. This financial need adjustment step is used to send the financials back to your accountant for just that, for their adjustment. So maybe you notice that that reclass didn't happen, or maybe you notice that we need to process a reserve transfer. You can step it to financials need adjustment, include a little note that says, please process this transfer, or please do this, please do that. And then your note, just like we can see that note that Michael left when he stepped the action out of the manager review, that note that you leave when you step into financials need adjustment will automatically attach to the action item. So that way the accountant will get a new action item. They'll see, okay, I've got this financials delivery and the financials need adjustment step, and they'll see that note that you left with whatever your request adjustments are. So first of all, let me stop. Does that make sense to everyone as far as if we get our financial package, we need to make adjustments? Does everyone know what we need to do, how we get it back to the accountant? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. Okay. So let's say that, and now, so what'll happen is your accountant will then adjust the financials, and then when they're finished, they'll just step it back to manager review. So they're just putting it back on your plate to review. So once we have reviewed the financials and we say, okay, well, great job, these look good to go, then we have two options. If our boards do not require approval of these financials before we post them to the document library or before we do what we need to do with them, we can just step to this manager approved step. That step sends the action item back to your accountant, and your accountant will say, hey, I see my managers approved these, and they can go ahead and post those financials to your association's document library for you. But if your association requires that board approval before those financials get delivered, you will use that board delivery step. And so I wanted to take a look and show you guys, as far as how the action item is built, what that board delivery step does, and then how we follow down the process from there. So let's go peek back behind the curtain here and take a look at our action item. And so we can see here's our financial delivery action item that we're using. We have that manager review step. So if we step to the board delivery step, what that is actually doing is that is assigning that action item. It's sending a communication. Let's look and see, do we have that going via user preference? Let's see, do we have an email template set up for that? We do have an email template set up for that. So that is sending an email to you as the manager and the board with that email template saying, hey, these financials require your approval. And this board delivery step is just like that board approval step that we're used to as far as the invoice action item is concerned, where we actually assign an action item to the board and they log into their portal and they can approve or decline that thing. Same logic here. So when we step to board delivery, your board is going to have a few different options as to what happens next. They're going to either be able to say, yep, the board approved, or the board is requesting adjustments. Those are the only two options that your board is going to have from that point, right? So anytime you step to that board delivery step saying, hey, I need my board to approve this, what you're doing is you're sending an email to the board, and you're putting that action item in a step that allows the board to approve it at that point. Okay.
But they can't hear us, is what I'm saying.
So one thing to keep in mind, if you're a manager and you need to step your action item to board review, one best practice that I would highly recommend is to include that attachment when you're actually sending it to the board. So if you're saying, hey, board, I need your confirmation on this, go ahead and grab the financials that you're sending to the board so that way your board gets an email with the financials. Does that make sense to everyone? Just make it a little bit easier for them to get in and jump and see what the heck it is that you're talking about at that point. Right. So let's stop real quick. Do I have any questions up to this point?
No questions so far.
No.
Okay, cool. So let's go back to our board delivery step. So we said, okay, our board has a couple of different options. They can either step to board approve or board adjustments requested. If they step to board approved, that action item then comes back to you as the manager to let you know, hey, the board has approved this thing. So at that point that the board has approved your financial package, and give me just a second, I'm getting a note from Amy here. Okay. So then she's just clarifying a point about posting the financials. So once your board has approved the financials, they've stepped it to that board approved step. That comes back to you as the manager. So the step that we use to then post the documents to your association's document library is this financials approved step. And so what we have on this step is logic that puts those financials in a specifically defined file path, right? So if you have stepped that action item to board review and your board has confirmed they've approved the action item, they said, okay, I've approved these financials. You as a manager are going to step from board approved to financials approved. And when you step to financials approved, you're going to grab the financials that you want to approve, right? So that's just that same case of, all right, I'm stepping the action item. And when I step it to that financials approved step, you're grabbing your existing attachment of the financials. So one point to make, if you're stepping to the financials approved step and you don't actually grab your financials, nothing is actually posting, right? You stepping to financials approved is indicating, yes, financials are approved, but that is also where you define what it is you want to attach at that point. So we're automatically going to throw those financials in that specifically defined file location, but you have to actually tell us what it is you want to post. So again, the point here is when you step to financials approved, you are going to grab the existing attachments of your financials to post at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And so, and that's really it. That's really it. So a very simple process is, okay, our accountant has produced our financials. They passed it to us to review. We review. Then from there, we can step to, hey, financials need adjustment, or our manager has approved these financials. And then if we need to bring the board in, we just go down that board delivery path. Once the board is approved, that then comes back to us, and then we post the financials to the document library. And that's pretty much it. Now, if your board members have questions, once it's in that board delivery status, those questions are going to come back to you as the manager, right? So you're going to see that you have that board delivery action item on your action item list, but those messages are going to come back to you both on the action item and in your My Messages screen. If you need to communicate back and forth with your board while the action item is in that board delivery status, or any other status for that matter, you can simply send a message through the action item, and you can send that message to everyone on the board by sending to board, or you can send that message to specific board members, right, by selecting those board members here and typing in your message. So as a best practice, if you're communicating with your board about the financials, as opposed to communicating through Outlook, if you communicate through Vantica, all of those messages that you're sending are going to be logged on the action item, and all of their responses are going to be logged back on the action item. Again, keeping that communication trail in one clean, easy location to view, as opposed to having to reassociate and pull those messages back from Outlook. Okay. So let's stop here and see what questions you guys have for me. Do you have any questions about how financial delivery works? Anything that I didn't cover here? Anything that you're curious about? Let's see. All right, question. How do we add and send the variance report prepared by the manager to the financial package sent to the board? Okay, that's a great question. So if I have my financials in this board delivery step, and I have my financials here, I've got my attachment, and when I go to step to send this to the board delivery status, I want to grab my financials in addition to my variance report. I can just hit select files here and grab that variance report from my desktop. However, if I want to add that variance report to this one PDF, creating one single PDF, what you'll want to do is you'll want to download this report and then open up your PDF viewer and add your pages to that one PDF. So the easiest way, if you don't need it all in one big PDF, is to just step this to the board delivery step, right? And grab your financials and then use your attachment select to grab a copy of your variance report or that picture of that draft that you want to show them. Does that answer your question? Okay. Other questions on financials? Keep them coming. We're on a roll here today. Okay. If we don't have any other questions on financials, what questions do we have about things at large? Invoices doesn't necessarily have to be about financials. Are we using our service provider's invoices page? Has anyone reclassed an invoice from this page?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either.
Okay, service providers, invoices. And let me go grab Oscar the Grouch here. Do I have him in this database? Yeah. Let's grab Oscar the Grouch. So here's an invoice for Oscar the Grouch sitting in signature approval. If I look back and I said, man, I approved that invoice, but I approved it for the wrong GL. It hasn't been paid yet. I can go ahead and reclass this thing by hitting this reclass button here. So notice I've got my invoice pulled up. I hit this drop-down menu. I'm on the GL Detail tab, and I can see this little reclass button. When I hit this reclass button, I can see the account that it was coded to, and then I can select or change the information that I want to change here. So if I wanted to change this to, some other GL, I just click in the field, and then let's find some other GL. Like, do I have maybe a landscape contract that I want to apply it to, right? I'm going to select my reclass date. I can just do today's date. And when I hit update, that reclasses my invoice for me. And you go back to the invoice, you can see that it's been reclassed, but you also have this little view history button. That's pretty handy because it shows you the history of how the invoice was expensed over time. So you can see, well, I had it coded to this, but then I reclassed it to this. So that view history tab is really, really helpful for you doing research on invoices, especially ones that have been reclassed a time or two. So again, this is under the service provider's invoices page. You find your service provider, you find your invoice, and then you hit that little drop down and you got this GL detail here. So let's see, you got a question here on invoice approval. So let's go take a look at that. Let me jump into, I don't want to approve any of your guys' invoices. So let me jump into Presidential Valley. And let's find some invoices. All right, so let's get an invoice. Let's just push an invoice into the system. Create a new action item. I want this to be an invoice action item. I'm going to start it in complete data entry. I'm going to add my attachment. I'm pretty sure I've got a flux capacitor invoice laying around here. Let's use that. And then I'm going to update and select this invoice because I'm going to put on my AP hat and I'm going to go ahead and code this invoice. So there's my invoice image, 1149.96, 1149.96. I'll select my service provider here. We'll put this under Oscar the Grouch. We'll add my GL. Do I have a trash GL? Do contract landscape maintenance. Okay. Let's see, I don't have an account. If I did have an account, one point on the AP side, if I did have an account, I could throw that account in and then hit refresh GL and it'll show me the amounts I paid. It'll just, refresh my last GL that I paid that vendor. But in this case, let's just stick with the landscape contract here. So we'll update that. All right, it's gonna take me to the next invoice. So now let's jump back. And I'm gonna go to my accounting approved invoices screen. All right, so I'm a manager. I've got my manager hat back on now. Thanks for following me along with that little ride there. Now we've got our invoice ready to approve. So I'm under accounting, approve invoices. Notice my invoice is in the ready to approve tab. And the reason that it's in the ready to approve tab as opposed to complete data entry is because this invoice has the GL, it has the amount, it has the service provider, it has all the necessary information to code this invoice. If maybe this invoice had been pushed through and AP wasn't able to identify what GL to associate this with, heck, it's a flux capacitor invoice, who the heck knows what it's to be coded to. If they don't assign the GL for that, that's just going to show up in complete data entry. Complete data entry just lets you know, hey, this invoice does require maybe a finer tooth comb, right? Ready to approve says, hey, AP's coded it, I just need to confirm, okay? While we're on this page, provider on hold is where we're going to tuck any invoices for providers that are on hold. And we have a column here to show you what that hold reason is. So if you don't have that hold reason column saved, I would say jump into that tab, set that column for hold reason, maybe determine whether or not you want to remove like that attachment column if that's not something that you use, and then save your grid settings. So that way, every time you come to the provider on hold tab, you can see what the hold reason is. And then prepaid review, a few of you may have been seeing some invoices here. This is where we're going to tuck any invoices that are set to pay on auto draft. So that just lets you as a manager just say, hey, this thing's already been paid, but if you want to add an invoice attachment there, just sign off that you acknowledge that payment. That's what that tab is for. But really, as a manager, these are the two tabs that you're going to be living in the most, right? Ready to approve and complete data entry. So from ready to approve, I click this little drop-down menu that shows the GL that my invoice is coded to. If I want to add an invoice detail to this, like some other GL, I can do that. This messages tab is going to show me how the invoice came in. I can see that it was created today at 4:15. I can see that I completed data entry on it. I see the system checked for duplicates, and it came here to my ready for approve tab. So from here, if I say, okay, this is good to go, maybe I want to just confirm something, so I can look at my invoice attachment there by clicking on that little attachment icon. And then from here, if I'm ready to go, I'm just going to select and hit approve selected invoices. And that's it. So now, after I have approved that invoice, I can go back to my service provider's invoices page, and I can go follow that invoice along the process to see how it was coded. And if I need to reclass at that point, I can, right? Because I can jump in here, I can see that it's sitting in board approval, and maybe I want to jump in and reclass it or something like that. I can do that. All right, let's see. Question. So how do we pay things from a different bank account, like a different fund? So maybe you want to pay something out of reserves. Let's go take a look at that. I'm going to go to all action items. We're going to grab an invoice. And then I'm going to do something that you guys should never do, and that is step these invoices. So we're going to say that the board declined that. And then we're going to bring it back to manager complete data entry. So let's go back to accounting approve invoices. Now it's in complete data entry. So if I want to change the bank account that I'm paying this invoice out of, notice under fund, it's blank. We by default will pay everything out of our operating fund, right? But if I wanted to change and maybe pay this out of some reserve account, I can hit edit and select that reserve account here and hit update. So now instead of paying out of my operating account, I'm paying out of the bank account that's tied to this reserve to fund, right? So to look and see which bank accounts are associated to which funds, we can go to association funds and see that information here. So I can see all the funds and the bank accounts that are set up for those different funds for this association. So again, under our accounting approved invoices page, we go to our invoice. And if we say, hey, I want to pay this out of my operating instead of the reserves, just hit edit, and we'll change this back to one of my operating accounts. I've got set up my test association. Then I'm ready to approve, check, approve selected invoices, and we're set. All right, so another question here related to invoices, looking at check images of paid invoices. So let's go there real quick. And when we're talking about, I guess leading into this discussion, the accounting bank register page is a very, very helpful resource for you as a manager, because this is letting you see all the transactions that are hitting the different bank accounts for the associations that you manage. So let's take an association. I'm not going to have any reconciled transactions for a fake bank account. So let's pick an association here. Haven't picked on Canonsgate in a while. Let's go to Canonsgate. So from a bank account register, I can see how checks or how invoices are paid, whether they're paid via ACH or paid with a check and that sort of thing. So if I have an invoice check and I want to see if that check has been cashed, what I'm looking for is whether or not that invoice check has been reconciled. So if I see that I have an invoice check and that invoice check has been reconciled, such as this payment here, that lets me know that that invoice has been paid and it has been cashed. So clicking on this paperclip is going to let me see not only a copy of the invoice that was paid, but if I click next here, I can see a copy of my canceled check. Okay. And from this bank register page, I can also see what GL this was coded to and the amounts. I can look at this messages tab and see how this invoice came in, how it was coded, who approved it, when it was approved, all that good stuff. And then again, this because of the bank register page, I have a drop down to select the different bank accounts for the association that I'm looking at. So if I wanted to go look and see maybe some amount that was paid out of a reserve account, for example, I could go and view that by just selecting that other account. So good questions there. Thanks, guys. What other questions do we have today? Anything else we're curious about?
What if we need to overnight a check, says Mark?
All right, so if you need to overnight a check, now I can tell you how we can pay things through the in-office check, but I can't speak to what CAM's process is for that. So is there anyone on the CAM side that could speak to how you guys have managers handling in-office checks? Because we do have a pay type for in-office check, but I can't speak to as to whether or not Spectrum is using that pay type and using a different process for those payments.
Yeah, I don't know either, BD.
Okay. So what we do is the manager emails Sandy, and I'm thinking that even SCS managers will email Sandy since her role has changed a little bit. And she has her own process that she follows through. So the managers just need to make sure that everything is done on their side. So you have to approve it. If you need to have your board signature approval, reach out to the board, let them know to approve that. And then just you need to let Sandy know that that check needs to be printed in office and overnighted.
So Natalia, do you have them using the in-office check pay type when they're making that selection? Like how are you guys differentiating that, or is Sandy just going and bird dogging it?
It's still done with regular check, with the check type.
Okay, the regular check payment type.
Yes, it's just a matter of talking directly with her.
Okay. Do you guys ever use in-office check as a pay type?
I haven't noticed it, but that doesn't mean that we don't.
Okay. Well, and that's something that we can talk about offline, but we might have a conversation with, Amy, Jessica, the other powers at B to just determine whether or not we could gain some process efficiencies by utilizing that pay type. So to bring everyone into the conversation here, let's grab that invoice that I had for Presidential Valley for that flux capacitor, and let's bring that back from board approval back to our, let's pretend that the board declined it. And then now let's step that back to our manager complete data entry. And then we'll go back to our accounting approve invoices page to approve it. So we have a pay type here of in-office check. And the reason that we designed this in-office check was specifically for rush check requests, because when our AP team is going to print their checks, they have this check queue, right? So they're going in, they're saying, okay, here's all the checks that I need to print. Well, we have the ability with this check queue to separate in-office checks from regular checks, so that way management companies can use the in-office check type as their way of their managers indicating these need to be put in the mail. And so what that does is that prevents us from having to email Sandy and Sandy to go look this stuff up, because if we know as a manager that we pay something via in-office check, that it's going to be put in the mail or there's some other process that's going to be held by those checks, then that allows us to segregate those items and deal with them in a more efficient way. But that's just a conversation we probably need to take and build on, especially now as we bring SCS into the fold and we're, develop out these efficiencies. All right. So what other questions do you guys have for me today?
What is the difference between the steps of complete data entry and manager complete data entry?
Complete data entry is
and they do
assigned
basically the same thing.
Yeah, complete data entry is assigned to AP. Right.
Okay.
Wrong thing. I've got a brain out right now. So let's go to the invoice action item. Because that's a really good question, Mary Helen, and I can probably answer a couple other questions through this answer, right? So complete data entry is assigned to AP. So this is the very first pass at coding that invoice. This is where AP is going in and saying, here's my service provider, here's my association. If at that point, AP can identify an account number and tie it to that invoice, once they tie the account number to the invoice, they can hit that refresh GL button that we were looking at a minute ago. And by doing that, that will populate your association service contract settings for that invoice. So what that means is when AP goes in, if they can identify the account number and the vendor for that association, and you've got that account number set up with a service contract to maybe say, I want all of these invoices to get paid out of my legal GL. Once AP assigns that account number and hits refresh GL, your invoice is going to automatically update to this information here, right? Furthermore, once that account number has been picked up, if you have auto approval criteria set up for those invoices, because maybe they're a utility bill, you can set up that auto approval criteria to automatically approve those invoices or do whatever it is that you're doing with that approval criteria. But the important thing to know here is AP has to be able to pick up that account number and associate that account number to that service provider and that association in order for this automated logic to work in the background. So it's a very important step, but that's a step where AP gets it before you guys as a manager give your final sign off on it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. What other questions do we have today?
I have another one if somebody else is jumping.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you go over, I know we've talked about it before, but for things like utilities where a coupon is required with their payment or else they just absolutely don't want to process it, can you go over where that is again? I know I've come across it once, and I think by setting that coupon location, it solves the problem, but if anybody else has that issue, it might be helpful.
No, yeah, that's a good question. That's something that we don't talk about very often, so that's awesome that you brought that up. So right now, I'm under service providers and payment methods. So you'll probably want to just jump into the service provider list first and select what service provider you want to look at. So in this case, I'm picking on Oscar today, so let's select him. So once we get our service provider selected, we can go to that payment method screen and we can define what our coupon location is. And so this is just a way of saying when our service provider sends me invoices, where are his remittance coupons located, right? Are his coupons located on the top of the first page, bottom of the first page, bottom of the last page, right? And so then when we go to print our checks, we can append that coupon location to the checks that we print. So that way your service providers can more easily associate the payments with the associated invoice. Is that what you're looking for, Mary Helen?
It is.
Cool. And does that make sense to everyone as far as like what that does? Clear as glass? I'm hearing a lot of nodding heads out there today, Mary Helen. I guess I'll take that as a good thing.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Are they creaking and squeaking? So just for everybody's benefit, in my particular situation, there is a small utility who just absolutely refuses to process. That you could have as much information as you want on the check, but they will not process it without their coupon. And this is how we alleviate that. So the image of the coupon is actually printed on the check stock. Is that still accurate? It was the last time I saw it.
Nope, yep, you got it.
And I remember Dave, I believe, saying that they'd never had a vendor come back and say they couldn't take that payment. So it's pretty handy if you know you have one of those.
Totally, yeah. If you have those sticky vendors that are very particular, showing them that exact coupon for the invoice that's being paid really clears it up, and I'm not seeing any pushback on that whatsoever because you're literally showing them what you're paying on the same page. So yeah, another good question. What else you got for us? Any other questions out there? Invoices, financials, other items? All right, well, if not...
Are we at a point where we can link? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are we at a point where we can link owner accounts?
I don't feel comfortable answering that because I'm not
okay.
the status of your data imports. That'd be a better question for Lauren or Meredith.
Okay.
I've not been involved in that side of the data, so I can't really speak to that. What other questions do you guys have for me? All right, well, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and wrap this up and we'll get this recording downloaded and posted to our CAMS YouTube page. Thanks for your time, everyone. Thanks for all the awesome questions you guys submitted today, and I will look forward to talking to you guys real soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
BD.
BD.
Thank you,
Thanks,
BD.
BD. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Bye, you too.